I'd prefer to have a queen or a jack than a king there, a significant margin. But, you know, probably fine. Villains should not really have many fives, particularly when I have the hand that I have. A million things that you can do on table 2. Here with the 10 of hearts, I'm gonna continue to fire here. I just have a lot of relevant blockers, despite my ace, you know, having a little bit of showdown value. But against, like, you know, my villain's ace high calls from the small blind, I don't actually have that much showdown value. And on 5-5-2, you know, like, what draws is gonna have there? Again, a bunch of different things that you can do on 4-3-8. I feel like my 7 has a little bit of connectivity, but after I get called, I'm gonna just try to check my hand down, and I actually do beat a lot of hands, so max value. Very, very thin max value. Here, when this board is so disconnected, I actually just get a bunch of auto folds, so betting is not horrible, and my hand has a little bit of connectivity on future streets. The 6 is obviously horrifying for me, because villain should have, you know, some 6x, because he probably is going to be raising some of his queen x. I block the diamonds. Just going to fold here. Small blind leads a non-intimidating size, so I'm going to start with a call and evaluate future streets. Turn is good for my hand. Probably not fantastic for my range, because I think the small blind should have more hearts than I do, but when he checks, I think he's just turning his hand face up, so I still think I can get some value. It's probably close after he led the flop into multiple people. Yeah, take a a kind of a simple route here and see if this guy just kind of exposes his hand pretty face up. A bajillion hands have now missed by the river, and betting this size only makes sense with a 9x that he didn't check raise the flop with, so. Obviously gonna start with a check call on table 3. The 10 is gonna be really, really good for our range in the check calling range, and then so I like to put in a small donk sometimes in that spot, but then when we get to the river with a hand that actually can just showdown and win, happy to just showdown and win. And you do actually win at showdown there sometimes. This guy just donks in a spot where he's just gonna have it a somewhat inordinate amount of time at that sizing, so I'll just let him have it. Still value to be had. And here against this min, I'm just gonna hit pot instead of picking any other kind of, you know, balance sizing. Just gonna go for it. And then here, when he check raises on a 5 river, yeah, obviously happy to dump my hand. I should still have some, you know, weaker ace x's there. Like, I'll ask you this. How often when you get to a river do you check back and then your villain shows you the nuts? Is that pretty rare? If that's rare, that probably means that you should not be calling river check raises that often, right? Because when you when you check back, you're not being shown the nuts enough, right? So you only have to respect river check raises, right? If your opponent shows you the nuts occasionally when you check back. I just opened donks and good for him. And 8s is, a mix on the turn, but, when we have the diamond, it's obviously much closer to a call, if not a pure call. In theory land, betting here is not horrible because villain actually should not have that many 4s and 5s, but in practice I feel like villain's ranges are actually quite wide there, and they do actually have a lot more connectivity with that board. You can have a betting range on this flop. You can have a small betting range, I think. Your 4s is close. 5-8 is definitely a raise in the presence of the small blind here. With a jack turn, I think this hand should bet instead of double delay. This is close to a raise when he blocks, but I think when he leads 3 ways again, I'm just gonna call. That's an 8 on the river. And I think with no hearts, I'm pretty obligated to just continue to fire because now I unblock a lot of his hands. There's a very minority check with this combo against a small blind. I'm gonna roll it. Here, with pocket 6s facing a half pot bet, this is gonna be a call once, fold turn, but I should also have, queens and 10s that call twice, a bunch of different draws, So I'm very comfortable identifying this as near the bottom of my range. Ah, this is actually quite close against this sizing. Yeah, still gonna muck because of the position I was in. And here 5-6 has decent connectivity with both a diamond and a 4, so gonna start with a bet. Hit gin on the turn, so that means the overbet comes through. Easy game. Again, really want to stress the overall lack of craziness, right? It's just playing very solid and then picking some spots to be extremely loose, depending on how I anticipate my opponents will play post-flop. I'm going to limp 7-8 just so I can VPip against this guy. Sometimes this is horrible. Sevens is definitely going to be a 3-handed defense. Ace King is a 4-bet and unfortunately call off when he jams, which I'm not actually too thrilled about. He min 5 bets, which is, you know, absolutely disgusting. So I'm gonna call and hit an ace or a king, and then maybe put in no more money. But click 5 bets on the river. I mean, they just have to be pretty nutted. Well, maybe a little bit of value here after everyone checks through. And he bets quite large on the flop too. Bets like more than a quarter of the pot for sure. So click it back 5-bet against the under the gun 4-bet. Like maybe I can like super exploitatively fold. I mean, I don't want to ever kind of really you know, try to exploit fold the super top of my range when I'm against complete unknowns, but I think it's reasonable to take a line where I evaluate on the turn, or I evaluate on the flop. You know, I was turning my hand. My hand was a bluff before, but now it. I'm sorry. I was playing my hand for value before, but now actually, when the jack comes off, I think I can get like a 9 maybe to fold, or some kind of like worse pair. So I can actually turn my bad ace into a bluff there, which is a little non-theory. I mean, I hate this guy, the fact that this guy made this so large, but that just incentivizes me to actually 4-bet a little bit more, and, you know, given the stack sizes, I'm going to call off. A 4-bet pot, I'm supposed to play jam or fold here, and so I just can't imagine this hand is not in my jam range. Like if he has ace king or ace queen, puts him into some like kind of like weird spots. I mean, ace king just should snap. Looks like I 3-bet and just got cold called, so I'm gonna start calling. And after I slow play my flush on the flop, I'm gonna go for the fat OB to represent the ace of diamonds. You know, going for the full pot sizing is probably a little bit better if I am playing in a lower stakes game and I'm representing that I'm playing a polarized 3-bet, because that, you know, with the implication that I have a flatting range there as well. And whenever you're dividing your range between a polarized and a condensed one, you're allowed to pick the large sizing. So that's why in the big blind you often see that you have a larger sizing than when you 3-bet in the small blind, because you're playing the polarized range rather than a linear one. This is a little bit close. Checking seems also reasonable here. Does this hand bluff catch? I mean, having a 9 doesn't seem to be very good. Does this hand bluff catch? No. Nines. If the 5 did not come off, 9 seems to be a mandatory bluff catch. When the 5 comes off, it seems a little bit worse. Here's an example of, you know, using the more polarized 3-bet, so I'm going to go for 12. Oh, actually, I mean, I should really go to 13 here. I just looked at his open sizing. Mission failed. Here I open under the gun, and under the gun plus 1 4x's it here. I mean, like, I mean, having ace queen in your 4-betting range from early position to a tiny degree seems, you know, not the end of the world, but not against that sizing. Just feel like villain's turning his hand extremely face up. Here, this guy doesn't have enough money for me to really justify calling from 4s in a, you know, in a position where theoretically having no calling range is good. Kind of don't like that villain sized up. I can think about hero calling or hero folding the turn. But villain's just using a nonsensical size, so don't really have to worry about it. And I think that, you know, this is kind of a master class in showing that just being a lot more efficient with your bet sizes is the bee's knees. It truly is, right? You just make more money in every node of the game tree because you're, you know, spending less money when you bluff, you're winning more when you're value betting. Ace queen's actually quite close. The original player cold called, which is a little bit of a disaster. He should have mostly have pocket pairs here. I actually think my hand is good a non-trivial amount of the time, but I guess I can just have all of this. Gonna bluff river. He just called me the ace high. Good for him. Good for him. Is it, I mean, if this guy has a pocket pair and this guy's just checking it down and I hold this hand, I mean, it seems likely that my hand's actually gonna be best at river. But villain, unfortunate, it doesn't let me get there, and I don't think that he's bluffing here enough to let me consider doing anything silly. What jacks do villains have here? I think I might be able to get this through. Okay, it's not. I mean, in theory, the minority times that I do open threes with that position, it should be a defense 100% of the time, but I'm just gonna overfold in that spot. Recreational player goes check on the flop, so I'm just gonna let him turn his hand face up and go for small streets of value. Gonna let him bluff me now. Should not have too many jacks, right? Oakley dokley. It's like, oh, this doesn't make any sense at all. He should have spades instead of jacks. Villain min 3 bets me, bets small on the flop. Gotta think my hand's pretty good. And if he goes check on the turn, then I can value bet the river. The sizing doesn't make too much sense. Probably should just bet a third here a lot, but I think villain might just be bad. There we go. At this depth, okay. At this depth, I actually should be checking back a variety of strong hands to protect on the turn. And then actually play an overbet on the turn, which is a really weird strategy. I don't think you can overbet here. But there's just like a lot of weird lines that people have not explored enough playing super deep that I think are really interesting. So sometimes I like to experiment with them, even though I don't exactly know the lines in a bunch of these spots. But you know, fun to start with the flop line and then try to figure things out from there, because you get to play some lines that look, in my opinion, extraordinarily nonsensical, but are actually solver approved. Yeah, just happy to check fold that. I mean, I sometimes get run out, but not a huge disaster. And here against a recreational player, happy to bet jam. Interesting that this guy cold calls the 3-bet. The 3-bet again should have a lot of like middling pairs, so like 8s through jacks. Pretty happy with this result. Turn is good for me. I should have tons of jacks. I block, I have a queen and an ace blocker. A little bit deep, probably just gonna call this. This is probably a mix in theory. And then definitely have to bet the river with these particular blockers, I think. Villain bets near pot on the turn, a little bit deep. Let's just assume that that is him turning his hand to face up. Ace-10 is a little bit thin here. I think villain might just be overfolding in the line here, where he goes, where he checks the big blind, because a lot of people just, you know, recklessly bet there. I think this falls into an overbet. Happy to try. Villain pots on quite a draw-heavy board with not much money behind. So, gonna play in extremely straightforward manners. Getting called in two spots. Board is extremely dry. My hand requires a small amount of protection, so go start with a call. 10-7. King 7 can also be a 3-bet pre as part of my polarized range. There's other 7x's that I would 3-bet there. I bet 1/4 on the flop. It goes half pot on the turn. I mean, the problem there is that a jack and an 8 have coordination with that 10 in terms it has, like, you know, it's like the double backdoors that he flopped that continued on the flop now actually have paired up. And he can go forth in value. So, I think that is a decent hero fold. I think this is a fold at the higher rake. Quite confident I have the best hand here. I bet 2/3 in the big blind. Check raises me. I think this is actually quite disaster. I can fold quite tightly there. Here 8s would be close if we're 100 big blinds deep. I think 200 big blinds deep. You know, it's quite a fine defense, and I'm pretty sure that on these kind of boards, when he bets like half pot, you can actually consider folding 8s when villain's in the small blind because of their linear range. I'm actually not sure about the big blind. I probably am going to be a little bit more apt to call because of those reasons. I'm going to fold the river, obviously. Kind of exploitatively full 10s. 25 no limit. I don't think people 3-bet the under the gun people nearly enough, so just don't have enough bluffs there. This guy is not full stacked, so despite 5s being not a particularly great small blind overcall, I'm gonna go ahead and overcall here. Flop actually comes amazingly for me. I get called by both of the weaker players. Turn comes pretty good because I think that, you know, the ace is not a completely unlikely hand from either player, so I'm going to continue to fire. You know, and one of the important things about leading in that spot is the original raiser is not going to be actually betting that often, so you just want to go ahead and take the betting lead. And also, if you check raise the field, sometimes it looks a little strong, etc., etc. Against the 3-better, or as the 3-better, just going to go ahead and range bet on the board that is just crushing for me. Villain should not have any 2s. I should have jacks, and, you know, I mean, we should both have the same amount of jacks, but one goes crazy on the turn. This hand is a shade out of our cold 4-betting range. I mean, not a shade, it's actually quite a miss, but you get the idea. Holding a couple blockers is always really good. And small blind versus big blind, having an ace here and checking it down has quite a lot of value against the villain's limping range. I can't have 3s in my under the gun range, so that means I should. This is a board where I should probably mix my nuts a little bit. And, you know, it doesn't really work out this time, but in other imaginary multiverses, my opponents go absolutely berserk on me when I hold the nuts. I mean, and that actually is the case, right? When you check back on those boards, sometimes people just think you're uncapped and go for it with ridiculousness. I'm all about inspiring ridiculousness. I think defending ace queen here is a little bit speculative. So like 4-betting it, or I mean calling ace king there's ace queen there's a little speculative. And obviously my hand has amazing blockers for against my opponent's jamming range, holding an ace and a queen. A lot of different ways I can play this table. I'm going to start with a check because I block, you know, like, I block a king high, which is a lot of my villain's air calling range on the flop. So I can go check, 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 and then consider value betting the river. In theory, kings actually just checks down the entire time. And, you know, I'm going to expect to call and lose here some percentage of the time. You know, but, you know, in theory, on those ace high boards, after it goes check, 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 there should just be a lot of mutual passivity, and so you actually can just check down kings because villains should have some aces in their range by the time you get to the river, so you actually don't get that much value. And also you block, again, you know, villains like nothing type hands that just call the river. Versus while you have like a hand like jacks or queens, those hands actually might go for value at some point because they need a slight bit more protection and they actually can get value from worse. It's very, very subtle, but you know, in practice, though, yeah, if everyone checks to you by, you know, if someone checks to you 3 times by the river, you probably can go for value in that spot. Plus on the button, that probably is going to be a little bit better. Thought about raising the turn there with kings. I think raising the turn there might not be good, but I think calling and then actually leading a blank river, which seems extremely donkish, is actually good. And it actually might be solver approved in some spots. I know that especially when the river comes just like a blank deuce, solvers sometimes just go ahead and lead, and you know that's a spot that is definitely not explored enough by humans, except for at the very, very high levels, where sometimes I see people like check call an ace high flop, donk small on the turn, and I'm like, wow, what absolute monsters. Running good in terms of, you know, putting my hand in and then holding when I get there, because, you know, that's definitely a huge part of running good. So I'm running, you know, despite putting my hand in with the best hand, I'm running over EV for sure. Just need to min raise against this guy. He donks when I have a gut shot without a diamond, but I have an ace. So probably calling with an ace or a diamond here in the 9. Yeah, that's probably fine. And it doesn't really have enough money for me to consider anything else but fold. King 10 when the big blind seems to be recreational. I mean, this is going to be standard open almost regardless, but I'd probably go down to King 9 offsuit, Ace 8 offsuit. Alright, get to like the 30 to 35% hand range of hands there. This hand is really close under the gun against that player. This is an open against a big blind. Early position limp, so generally going to be checking this hand because I'm just going to give him immense credit for being strong. Like these guys will limp like ace jack off, you know, ace jack off suit, ace 10 off suit, queen 10 suited. So when they're doing limping shenanigans with these like middling strong hands, you definitely should just be completing when you have king 10. When they limp the button, I mean, king 10 has got to be the best hand, so just raise it up. I have a king here. King seems good. Possibly the best hand, can bluff a diamond, have a gut shot. I like these things. Now my hand is definitely a raise because I block multiple categories of hands. So I block both 5-7 and the diamonds. So when my hand resembles the nuts a lot, money goes in. I don't like squeezing this hand with the presence of this guy. I mean, this actually is just a fold. And I know this looks really, really nitty, but I pretty sure that that is right. Like, if everyone was full stack there, yeah, go ahead and 3-bet. Go ahead and squeeze, but you're just getting into so many awkward situations when the button there is only 50 big blinds. Like, calling there sucks because you're just going to run into only reverse implied odds situations. Squeezing sucks because then you're inflating the pot in a spot where it's very unlikely villain is now going to fold should he hit any pair. I 3-bet pre with complete air. The board comes high and good for us, so gonna start with a bet despite our hand having just extraordinarily low equity. Gonna mix on the turn. Pretty obligated to bet the bottom of my range here. Gonna check this almost no equity hand against the short stack wreck, anticipating that I can bluff him off on a future street. Villain donks half pot into me. But I mean, I have board connectivity with both the diamond and the tens blocking some potential king X. Although, you know, when we both have diamonds here, you know, he can still have all the other, you know, king X's. That's small. If it's so small, I just don't think I can ever fold. Sometimes he still has like the ace of diamonds and is gonna give up on the river. Ugh. Do I beat hands 1 out of 6 times? I mean, I guess I do, but I feel like he has a weak king that's going for like a blocker. And I don't know anything about anything. I don't know, after he checks back the flop, if I should turn this combo into a bluff. Yeah, probably not. But when my hand resembles the hands that I want to value bet, then usually you should be betting. It's a pretty good rule. Against the weaker player, gonna just go ahead and bet, see what happens. He donks the turn small. I think this is an ace, so I'm gonna raise here, have him call, and then bomb the non-connecting river. So I identified that villain had a hand that was probably going to go call fold, and then, you know, raising with the intention of, you know, of barreling him off those hands that are going to fold there. I folded 7s against the under the gun open, because I'm a huge nit, but again, I mean, that's very standard. Turn should be really good because I think that he should have a lot of king X's in his float range, especially when I have queens, right? That's more likely that he has some kind of draw. Exactly 6-7 gets there. Shouldn't be too worried about it. I have a distinct hatred for everything in the universe. I love everything in the universe. Everything, everywhere, all at once. Kablooey. Oh, okay. He tried his best. It was not good enough. Yeah, that's fine. Ace, jack, ace, queen. Suited are probably good 4-bets in that spot against a small blind. I think ace, jack suited is very good. Ace, queen offsuit is very good. Ace, queen suited, king, queen suited, close. I mean, ace, queen suited is probably a call. King, queen suited is a mix of some sort. Right? When I'm 4-betting, I'm just always thinking about our relative positions and what kind of 5-bet jams I'm trying to block. This hand actually would fall into a bet if I was playing a mixed strategy on the flop. But here I'm just going to check range. A little bit more than half pot. Yeah, I can fold this hand. This guy just overbets the turn outright. I guess I'm gonna peel one time and then just like snap check back. That makes zero sense at all. I don't know what's going on. I guess fold to the raise. Doesn't make too much sense for him to randomly bluff raise the 6 of hearts without... I prefer 5-3 over 6-3 here from a theory perspective. Gonna isolate the limper with Queen 9. Also gonna isolate the limper with King Jack. Much success. You go ahead and donk's quite large. I don't think that he should have too many queens in his calling range, so I'm quite happy to just call and call. Here on table 4, again, shouldn't have too many queens here. I'm just gonna super snap. That is hilarious. But after he limps, when I hold a king jack and the board is queen high, I can definitely barrel twice and expect it to have high frequency of success. That was a strange tilt by villain. I don't know what he was really hoping to accomplish. I 3-bet queens, the flop comes ace 5 jack. This hand is not a horrible check on the flop. It definitely can go for value. Let's check on the flop. I'm gonna go for 2 small streets of value. I think I'm allowed to do this in this spot. Holding exactly this hand. Yeah, I still think I can do this again. That's very texture dependent on how many streets you can go for there. So when the board is actually like ace 7-2, you're not allowed to do that because there's not a second pair to get value from. But when it's ace jack X, you're allowed to go for like multiple small streets. It's probably better played as an overbet, to be honest. Might have messed up. I like this bet a lot, especially when the turn is an 8, because it now becomes an overcard to second and fourth pair here. I guess this hand is a pretty not horrible river bluff. I don't like the sizing. Still gets the job done. I think I should randomize against calling here. So that time I'm mentally rolling a fold. It's not necessarily as random as I always hope it to be, but... Is there value here? I gotta place this check call. I mean, that didn't really make much sense because he picked a large flop sizing. So if you picked a large flop sizing, he should not have too many jacks unless he's just being ridiculous. Just trying to get him off like king high or queen jack, or sometimes like I don't know. Do I actually get him off a 3 here? No, probably not. But I'll get him off slightly better air. even when he has pocket eights there, he has to really stop and think, because he's just like, wait, do I actually beat anything here, or am I only getting value crushed? So it's, you know, not the best situation for him. Close here. And just gonna bet, you know, small against this guy who's not a very strong player. I can go check, call river a lot. You can check this hand as well. As long as you don't put this into like a large bet, I think is really the key here. Double overbets the river when I hold the clubs, so okay. It doesn't really make that much sense in any universe for him to do that. I think small blind versus big blind. My hand does not have good enough blockers to barrel here. I'd probably prefer to have queen 10, jack 10 type hands and not have a king here. Jack is really good because then when he checks the river, he should have a lot of like jack 10, ace jack, etc. that now can, you know, call a small bet on the river, and this is obviously a super snap. I mean, just a little bit mortifying what hand that guy shows up with. Pair backdoor, obviously gonna call. The spade is actually quite bad for me because villain's out of position range should have more spades than me. Kind of gross here because I think he's going for thin value, and I, you know, want to go for a raise here against a bunch of his hands, but I am a chicken. I'm gonna bet this and follow through on the river because this will now unblock his clubs. You know, having said I'm intending to fire when there's no clubs, then that probably means that I should be checking a bunch when there are clubs. And also, you know, my turn betting range should be extremely, extremely club heavy, right? Which is, you know, precisely why I have some hands that can go bet there and block it. I'm gonna play a mixed strategy here. Villain can have king 10, so. Gonna raise this targeting this guy. I mean, I'm actually just gonna fold against this guy because he's so short and it's just going to be a disaster should I actually flop a pair very often when the very short stack limper continues. This has enough board connectivity to, I guess, consider to be a bluff here. My 9 is actually live if I hit it on the river and can check back. My king's obviously live and can possibly go for something value, so this hand seems to be a decent bluff. This is going to be a mix between a call and a 3-bet. You just don't have that much value, you know, should, what the heck is going on here? Okay, so this guy's gonna pair a lot. Okay, so this guy's got jacks, etc. a lot here. I think I'm actually gonna start, especially when we're very, very deep, with a trap of some sort. So sometimes I let 5s get there, but I just think that this guy's got like 10s, 9s, 8s, etc. a lot. So I'm just gonna be able to milk him for 2 smaller streets of value. Trap didn't work, but I still think the idea is not bad, especially at that depth. How they weep facing this combination of sizes. I min bet the flop, 1.5x the turn with a hand that has, you know, a little bit of connectivity. And it just is a nightmare for a lot of people to face, frankly. It's a nightmare for even when I'm facing it, but it's like whenever a fish like donks into you for a min bet and you call and then they just double over bet the turn or pot the turn, you just feel like such an ass for not raising on a previous street or just folding on a previous street when you didn't have enough equity. And you know, you kind of get the same thing here. You bet minimum on the flop, your villain is forced to float with a very, very wide range and then bombs. Very loose here, but I'm going to target the small blind. 10-5-3. Villain should definitely have all of this. I'm going to start with a check call. very likely have the best hand on table 2. Go for a check raise with blockers and then get smashed. At least my opponents are making like very, very gigantic mistakes that are easy for me to capitalize on with folds. So this depth I'm actually just gonna flat. You know, like I know it's not great to have a very wide flatting range or a flatting range in theory at all at these higher stakes games. Overbet on the turn, gets there on the river. Usually, you know, when the turn is an ace, or, you know, when the flop is an ace and it goes check check on the flop, you really want to play an overbet or a check strategy, mostly because when villain checks back on a board that is favorable for him, you assume it's because his range is very bluff catcher heavy. So if his range is very bluff catcher heavy, then it doesn't really make too much sense to use these smaller bet sizes, which gives him relatively easy decisions. So you really want to go for big boy bets to, you know, put him in a horrible spot when he has ace high, low kicker, second pair type hands. That's going to be true with both your value and your bluffs. Right, when he checks back, oh, he's bluff for catchery, so, you know, I want to bet, like, my really, really nutted hands. Should be checking this turn a lot. Not too much river value at this point. But still got a bet. At least a call, sometimes a raise here. Definitely want to raise more when I have clubs. So just gonna flat here. Villains should not have too much 7-8 here. Especially when they check, obviously, but I mean, I actually should be 3-betting some of my 7-8s here. Does it make very much sense for me to bet this river? Yes, it does. Mostly trying to get his, like, you know, air hands out. You know, some of his club hands. Nope. I isolated this hand. I'm gonna check this combo here for a little bit of deception. Also, I don't think that at this depth we're gonna be able to go for like 3 large streets of value, right? So I can just, you know, afford to turn some of my aces into bluff catchers. Really bad river, especially if he sizes up. Okay, well, he makes it easy, so. I have the song International Love stuck in my head, and, you know, the funny thing about International Love is that I think the songs that they shout are like New York City, Miami, and Los Angeles, and I'm like, do y'all understand what the word international means, Pitbull and Chris Brown? Like, I thought y'all were like international superstars. Y'all can't name one city outside of the domestic United States? The contiguous continent? Y'all can't even be like Alaska and Hawaii? Here's 7, 8, 10 with very little equity. I'm going to check and I probably just checked out a lot, but just see what happens. And here when this guy donks, I'm just gonna go ahead and snap up my hand. 10, 8, 6 is a board where I can use a variety of different betting strategies. Gut shot with a mediocre diamond. Don't think I continue against this double with that combo, but maybe I'm lying. I thought about check raising river should he actually bet there. I think that's kind of good. I need to have some bluffs there. I'm not exactly sure what my bluffs should be when it comes to runner 10, because like, I mean, definitely when it comes to runner 10, I should have a lot of, all my 10s should be like check raises for value there in theory. I say in theory like people say allegedly. Like I should have a bunch of hands there, allegedly. Okay, I think I've been playing for a decent amount of time. Did fairly well. Looks like I made, you know, like 3 or 4 buy-ins. I feel like I strongly outplayed my opponents. This is just, you know, random Monday evening crowd, so it's, you know, pretty representative of what the pool looks like. Just making tons and tons of mistakes just on a fundamental level, and just kind of, you know, punishing them or for just being kind of inefficient generally. And also just doing things like, you know, not betting a ton when the board crushes villains ranges, or, you know, picking the correct sizes to not get my opponent to float, or, you know, not trying to bet huge amounts when villains range is top pair heavy, stuff like that. So, you know, a lot of it seems very common sense, but it's not these like giant pots and how you play them that really make the difference. It's really understanding the small pot play and just playing really, really immaculately, I think is, you know, is the key to success in the smaller stakes. A lot of people just overlook them, right? Because you spend so much time thinking about like how do you play large pots, because, you know, they stand out in your memory, but, you know, being a small pot master is really where, in my opinion, all of the money is. So, cool. I hope you guys found this useful and engaging. As always, please leave comments down below if you want to see more of this kind of material. Otherwise, good luck to y'all.